My name's Jordan. I'm up in Chattanooga, so not too far from you, Thomas.
Cool.
And I've been a AAA developer for 10 years, programmer,
No way.
but I'm struggling with juicing up my prototype. So can you give some like simple things I can work on that can, let's say in the next month, really make it shine in a
Yeah.
programmer art sort of way?
Well, what's your goal with the prototype?
Uh, that's a good question. I'm not exactly sure.
Your goal should be to sell it before you launch it. Okay. Now you can sell a prototype to a publisher and they'll pay you money right now, but they're going to get, a rev share, right? Number two, you could sell it to a Kickstarter audience and they'll pay you right now for the future product. So it's kind of like a pre-order campaign. People don't like it when I say that, but it's kind of like a pre-order campaign, except they're supporting you, right? So it's a pre-order campaign, but they're supporting you at the same time. Number three, you can sell it to a Steam audience with a demo. So a prototype is a demo. And so ultimately you can, if you don't want to sell it to a publisher and you don't want to sell it to a crowdfunding campaign, you can sell it to a Steam audience early by getting wish lists, right? So it's basically money that hasn't been, I don't know, converted into actual cash yet. A wish
Right.
list, if you get 100,000 wish lists, you could kind of bet that you're going to get 10% of those sales, right? So that's the first thing, is that should be the goal of the prototype, at least on the actionable outcomes. You might just want a prototype because it feels good, right? I don't know. But if those are your three goals, you can do one or all of them if you want. Seriously, you can do a crowdfunding campaign, you can do you could reach out to publishers and secure funding, and you can also launch a demo, right? You can do all of those things at once, or you can do one of them, right? I highly recommend you at least do one of them. If you want to self-publish, it's the Steam demo, okay? So that's the goal of a prototype, at least what are the actual outcomes you can receive from a prototype. But there's also just having something that is a representative product of what your game is ultimately going to be, right? So a prototype is basically a super polished, shiny diamond, tiny little diamond that's hyper valuable, that represents what your game is in its best state possible. Frankly, for me, it's usually like my first 15 minutes of my game. So that first 15 minutes should be glorious. It should be the best part of your game. So your question is, what are some things to polish out my demo? What are some things that I should really focus on to make sure that my demo is either, marketable to those three categories I mentioned, but also ensures that it helps you out in the long run so that you better understand your game. So for me, I'll just speak for me, a hyper-polished demo should have everything a hyper-polished game has. It's just 15 minutes, right? So you just need to be thinking, okay, I just need to make the perfect demo. That's really all there is to it. Some people would say, well, a prototype shouldn't be really polished and it shouldn't have all this beautiful artwork. For me, I like my prototypes to have all of that polish. Certainly you should start with the gameplay elements first and have them really basic and just sort of gray boxed or with no set dressing. That totally makes sense. But ultimately for me, with a prototype, I want it to be at its fully fleshed out form, but short. So as long as you limit yourself to a few mechanics and like 15 minutes of gameplay, you can go all in with the set dressing. So for me, a hyper polished demo should include gorgeous set dressing. Now you can use assets if you want. You can find music. You don't necessarily have to license it yet because it's just especially if it's private. If it's for internal use or you're pitching to a publisher, I think it's totally fine to just say, hey, we're going to use unlicensed music. And frankly, I've done that before, where you just put in stand-in music that you feel like represents your demo. Game feel is really, really important with your hyper-polished demo. So really focus on, if it's an action game, it's really punchy, it's really crunchy, it's really mulchy. There's screen shake, there's flashes on the screen where necessary. You really want to focus on that extra oomph with game feel, because a lot of times game feel is the missing factor for most of these prototypes. If you have strong game feel, you can actually get away with a lot of, poor game design because it just feels good to play, right?
Right.
Now, all that aside, have you ever? Maybe you have. Have I talked to you, or have you heard about the Trinity hook?
I've watched a couple of your videos about the Trinity hook. Yes.
Okay, can you remember what the Trinity hook is?
The
Pop quiz here.
off the top of my head, no.
Okay. So the Trinity hook, and this is something I would say I kind of got ahead of myself. The Trinity hook is the first thing you need to be thinking about for your prototype. Okay? Because everything you do for your prototype needs to circle back to that Trinity hook. Okay? So the first thing is, maybe I'll do a little quiz for you here. What is a hook? So let's not
A hook
about,
is just
yeah.
something that gets the audience or the intended audience interested.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So it's literally like, you could call it bait, actually. It's the bait on the hook. It's the shiny stuff on the lure when we're fishing. Okay? That's really what our hook is. So a lot of people try and figure out what their hook is, and they're afraid to even pin down their hook because they say, well, my game has multiple hooks. And that's why I say with the Trinity hook, you can think of the mechanical, story, and visual hook. Okay? So that's what a Trinity hook is. What's mechanically unique about your game, but not only unique, but recognizable. It catches people's attention, and they focus on it, and they think about it, and they want to see more, right? That's what a hook is. So it's a mechanical hook, a story hook, and a visual hook. So for your game, do you have any or all three of those?
The mechanical hook is a little too similar, I think, at the moment to other games. And
is that a problem, you think?
Not necessarily, but it's hard to show off that in a short trailer or like show off the interest of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So your mechanical hook you feel isn't there yet. What about your visual hook?
Visual hook is definitely not there. It's programmer art. It's squares and boxes. I'm trying to work with an artist. So, and then the story hook is also one of those twists at the end. So it's hard for me to have like an actual story hook in it.
It's a twist at the end. That's the hook.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not good, because if you're going to market a game, you can't have it be a twist. Can you imagine, though, if they marketed, if you haven't seen The Sixth Sense, it's on you guys, for everyone who's listening, if I spoil it, but imagine if they marketed it as he's dead the whole time. Like, imagine if that was the tagline. Well, people would go see it because like that's kind of a cool hook. But the problem is it wouldn't pay off. It's like a thumbnail that gives away all of the information for a YouTube video. You don't want that. You want the YouTube video to pay off the thumbnail. The same is true with a hook. If your hook is only a twist at the end, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. So with you, before you even work on your prototype, you need to have all three of those, especially if you want to be profitable with your game. But also, even if you don't want to be profitable and you just want to have a good game, it's super duper important to have these three elements for your Trinity hook. Now, obviously, you could just have a mechanical hook, or you could just have a visual hook, or you could just have a story hook and get away with it. A lot of games do. The problem is you don't want to invest in one stock portfolio when you're investing in the stock market. The same is true with a game. If you can invest in three hooks, you're much more likely to at least have one land, because most people think a hook is a hook and it's not a hook, right? And I've been guilty of this too. So why does it matter to get your Trinity hook before your prototype is done? Because everything about your prototype should focus on the hook. Everything should point back to the hook. Nothing should be done if it's not pointing back to the hook. Now, just to clarify here, you might say, I thought it was supposed to point back to the gameplay loop. Well, even the gameplay loop should spin around like planets orbiting the sun, which is your Trinity hook. So your gameplay hook, everything about your prototype, including the gameplay hook, circles around the Trinity hook, okay? So an example of this is if you're making a cult simulator like Cult of the Lamb, your story hook should, or your prototype should always hit on that story hook. That first 15 minutes of gameplay, you better do everything in your power to focus your story on that one hook. You better focus everything about your mechanical hook, meaning, or you should focus your prototype on the mechanical hook as well, which is cult simulation. And then your visual hook is this high contrast meaning it's super cartoony and super dark. That was the visual hook for Cult of the Lamb. Notice how everything they did in the first 15 minutes of gameplay was circling around that hook. And they didn't really stray from anything else. They didn't ever go outside the boundaries of that hook. The hook is the gravity of everything you do for your game. And if you don't have it, you're going to make kind of a watered down, boring game. Does that make sense?
Right. Yep.
Cool. Any questions about that?
No,
Cool.
not really.
Hopefully that gives you something to chew on. I think it's super duper important, and it's something that I'm still learning. So, thanks for that question. It was really good.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, friend, I want to see you succeed as a game developer. I want to see you make a full-time salary as a game developer. See, the thing is, most game developers don't know how to actually make money with their game. And believe it or not, you can actually make a full-time salary with just a demo. I've done this 3 freaking times. And I'm going to teach you exactly how to do that. Make a full-time salary with just a demo. Click the link below. It's a webinar, totally free, no gimmicks here. Check it out, watch the whole thing. You're going to learn a ton, and you're going to learn how to make 6 figures with just a demo. Cheers.